Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And we're having a look through them with Times columnist Jenny Russell and editor of The Spectator, Fraser Nelson. And we're going to get you all very excited about some more debates and some possibly more referendums. Let's hope not, Fraser, should we? This is in page 7 of the Times for tomorrow morning.
Yeah. Now, this is something I've long suspected. They've done a study about what the EU referendum campaign did, and they've shown that the Project Fear, the Remain campaign, actually recruited more voters to Brexit cause than to staying in the EU. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I actually wanted to vote to stay in the EU. I changed my mind on this during the campaign, which is very rare for me. And I think of the biggest interventions of that campaign, they were all like completely ridiculous claims being made by Remain that kind of insult your intelligence, saying, well, you know, that Calais camp, they're going to send all the refugees over to Britain. Turned out not to be true. Oh, there's going to be a house price crash, you know, and things at the time. You don't need to know much about politics to know that this is just nonsense. And where were the positive arguments for staying in the EU? If there weren't any, that told you something. And now the Electoral Reform Society has said that, first of all, the debate was very low quality because both sides were coming up with very implausible stories, but also that David Cameron's campaign was a turn-off, and he personally, it seems, repelled more voters than he attracted to the Remain side.
Got to be very careful, though, with this, in the sense that, I mean, both sides were pretty grim, weren't they? I mean, and the idea that you had literally months and months and months of two people or two sides just arguing the toss.
But it was more than arguing the toss. I mean, I'm very interested that this was Fraser's motivation, that he actually changed his mind. But I was sitting on the other side, absolutely appalled by the nonsense, the outright lies that were being told by the Leave campaign. The idea that we sent £350 million a week to Brussels and that could go to the NHS, the allegation that Turkey was about to join the EU and that 75 million Turks would soon be given the right to live here. There were so many outright lies, and I'm really interested in why, if Cameron's case was so off-putting, why didn't that turn people off? There's no explanation here about why that should be so, because I quite agree that both sides exaggerated, and both sides were dire, but more outright lies were told by Leave, and yet that doesn't seem to have...
Well, it could be that some of the scenarios are more plausible than others. I mean, it is Britain's official position that Turkey should join the EU, for example.
Well, it was made clear that it would take a couple of decades, if at all, and we always had a veto.
But it's the Britain's position that they should. But interestingly, the Remain campaign put a lot of weight on David Cameron himself, saying, look, this is the man who's just won a general election. He is our greatest single asset. We're going to deploy him, and he's going to put his whole career on the line here. Turns out that was a mistake for him, and a mistake for the campaign, because David Cameron, the study has found, did not swing nearly as many votes as he thought, and the votes he did swing turned out to be the other way.
And yet that is still a puzzle, because here was the man who had won a surprise election victory only a year earlier. He's hugely more popular than his party. He'd also managed to pull off the Scottish referendum campaign. I don't quite understand why he suddenly began to look toxic to the voters. Well, nor do I think that this study explains why.
Well, no, they just... to be honest, that's probably not very scientific. I mean, who can really tell what during the campaign changed your mind from one to the other? I mean, for me, the biggest shift was the renegotiation and the failure. And when that happened, I thought to myself, well, my great Europhile fantasy that the EU is going to reform and things are going to get better has just bitten the dust. So I was forced to... But I think that David Cameron has always placed a little bit too much trust in the idea of the politician as a sort of messiah figure. I think voters wanted to be persuaded one way or the other, and that persuasion wasn't happening. It was just, look at all these clever people, they're saying you should do this, maybe you should.
I think the key absence from the Remain campaign was emotion. I remember asking David Cameron just a month or so before the election, when I was talking to him for the Times, how he was going to inject some kind of emotional impact appeal from the EU to the British voter, and he said, you can't do that, and I'm not going to try. It wouldn't be right to. The only thing you can be emotional about in this campaign is Britain, and I'm very emotional about putting Britain first.
Yeah, that
and
doesn't
I think
really
the fact
help
that,
his
well, I think
did it?
as Fraser says, the positive case for Europe wasn't made. I mean, I feel very emotional about being part of Europe. I feel horribly cut off now that it looks as if we aren't going to be. I think that could and should be part of the campaign.
Now it feels that we aren't going to be. We
Oh,
aren't going to
completely.
be, are we?
It feels as if we aren't going to be. Well, we're not going to be part of the EU. Just now, I was flying into Mallorca.
But-
You walk through the gate and it says EU passports this way, and you think, I'm no longer part of that club.
Yeah, but
I'm
we'll
not.
still be part of Europe, though. We're not going to be sort of floating off into the mid-Atlantic here. You know, you're going to be as European, Jenny, as you were.
Was that a promise? I'll hold you to it.
Well, look, as we saw, and there's actually, it's quite interesting on the picture from Chequers above there, Brexit means Brexit. So there you go.